And welcome into a draft edition of Bleav in Panthers here on the Bleav Podcast Networks, brought to you by the fine folks over at FanDuel. Desmond Johnson in the house, my partner, Jonathan Stewart. I promise he will join me probably next week as we start getting deeper into draft coverage as we took a little mini break from the season. Joining me today, NFL analyst and co-host of the Preferred Walk-On College Football Show with Max Chadwick, Dalton Wasserman in the house. What's going on, Dalton? How you doing?
Oh, man, we're just ramping up towards draft season, right? Only a few weeks away, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Not just the first round, but I think some of the depth of this class going in day 2 and day 3. It's going to be fun to watch throughout the whole weekend.
So that's why I want to focus on pick 19, because really once we get out of the first round, it's kind of a crapshoot at that point. And it's really, what do you really like as in terms of in the top 20, 25 picks or so, you really can get somebody that can be a impact starter day one. The Panthers did a really good job in free agency. Dan Morgan was definitely cooking. He got potentially some of the best guys at some of the spots that we needed. Walker at left tackle, the linebackers they brought in for pass rush, and some little things here and there to fix some holes that we had. So I do love the fact that free agency and the draft have switched spots, where a couple years back used to be the draft first and then free agency. So you had a lot of reaching from teams in the draft. Now in free agency, you can kind of fill those holes with vets first. And now for the second year in a row now, Dan Morgan can go into this NFL draft, kind of drafting on want as opposed to need. I'm going to stick on the need side. And then at the very end of this, I'll ask you a bonus question about offense, because all of these are all non-ball touching positions basically here. But I feel like Dan Morgan's going to pull a Dan Morgan and do something with that 19th pick like he did last year. So one of the spots that I'm looking at for the Panthers after they got out of free agency was safety. They did draft Lathan Ransom last year in the 4th round. And he played fairly well. They did have Trevon Moehrig that they brought in on a big free agency deal last offseason. But I feel like they could take a swing here at 19 for a safety. Is there a safety out there that you could see in the mid to late first round that might be a good fit for Carolina in their system?
Yeah, that 19 spot is very much an in-between one. I think Caleb Downs probably from Ohio State, he probably won't get to that 19th pick. I think you could argue he's best football player in the draft. But two other guys that a lot of people are looking to go in this first round are Dylan Theamman from Oregon and Emmanuel McNeel-Warren from Toledo. Theamman is an excellent single-high player who can play that center field role for you and really hunt the football. And even then, the last 2 years, he's really expanded his role in 2 different defenses that he's played in. And McNeel-Warren, really good ball skills and a heavy hitter who brings a physical presence. You want him in the box, he can play in there. He can play a deep half if Ejiro Vero really wants to mess around with coverages on the back end. So 2 really good players there. We'll see where Theamman especially goes, because it feels like after his combine testing, he's a lock to be a top 20 pick. Could get into the back end of that, but I would expect McNeel-Warren to be on the board and possibly Theamman as well.
So that would make it a good it'd be a rotation, because Nick Scott just got re-signed in free agency as well. But he had some spots last year where he had some coverage slippages. I think they brought him back primarily for special teams and to be depth more than anything else. Lathan had some shining moments, but again, 4th round pick. Not sure if he's actually your answer at starting beside Mooring. Besides safety, it feels like cornerback is pretty secure. J.C. Horn's probably a top 5 cornerback in the league. Mike Jackson actually emerged the second half of the season last year to be a quality number 2. Is there a cornerback out there that they might take a swing on at pick 19 just because you can never have enough depth back there?
Certainly can never have enough. And if there's a talented player at that position that you want, you see the price for free agent cornerbacks and young cornerbacks, say Sauce Gardner or Trent McDuffie, and the money they got, right? And even the money that J.C. Horn got, they're getting more expensive on the veteran market now because it's such a premium position. But I think for an immediate help in this defense, you might be looking in the first 2 or 3 rounds even at guys who could play in that nickel spot and really compete with Smith-Wade in there, right? I think there's some really good nickel prospects. Even if you were looking at in the first round, I think an Avon Terrell out of Clemson could be someone who really intrigues them. A little bit undersized, but he's feisty. He really attacks in run defense, and he's got great ball skills. If you want to look on day 2, maybe somebody like a Keonte Scott from Miami, who was so good in that nickel position for them, and he's maybe the best run defending defensive back in the entire class. He just was outstanding this past year for Miami. So definitely some nickel prospects. Traden Stukes, Chandler Rivers from Duke. Also, I mean, you've just got some guys. I don't think they necessarily need an outside corner unless they're really looking for a future past Mike Jackson this year, and he had a really good year last year. I have no reason to think you'd get rid of him, but you mentioned it. Depth is always key, but I think that nickel position, even if it's not in the first round, might be something they look for in rounds 2 and 3.
Yeah, I feel like with Jackson, I think he has a short-term deal. It's like a couple of years or something like that. And they got him, I Bleav, from Seattle. And he really came on, especially a couple of games where JC was out. He had a concussion, had a little nagging injury or something, missed a game or two. And Jackson had a game, I think it was against the Rams, actually, where he had like multiple interception game. And Carolina beat the Rams in Carolina in that towards the end of the regular season. One of the things I was actually curious about was offensive line and tackle in particular. Now, they did get Walker from Green Bay on a 1-year deal. Ike Ekwonu has a torn patella tendon. He had just signed his 5th-year extension literally like the week before he tore the tendon in the Rams playoff game. I'm not sure if he's going to be available this season. I've seen 6 to 12 months for that injury, so I'm not really sure if they're even counting on him to be back this year or if they're going to try to rush him back. And then this morning I woke up and I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? The left side's not the only issue. Taylor Moton is actually in the twilight of his career over on the right side, right tackle. So even though they got Rashad Walker, they still might need something over on the right side or just a tackle that can be interchangeable both ways. The name I keep seeing pop up, and I mentioned this to Joe DeLeon when he was on with us a couple of weeks ago, is offensive tackle Kaden Proctor from Alabama. They typically at Carolina, Dave Canales and company, their offensive line is typically 320 plus in terms. They go for the heavier guys. And this dude is 6'7", like 355 or something like that. What can you tell me about Proctor? Is it too high to draft him at 19, or do you think he fits with what they might want to do going forward in the future? Because I feel like he could be the right tackle for the next 8 years in Carolina if they've got one of the best line coaches there as well.
Yeah, and he's got left tackle capabilities as well. I mean, he played left tackle all 3 of his years at Alabama, and if they didn't feel great about Ike Ekwonu and his long-term future with the injury, Proctor's got a boatload of talent, man. You mentioned it, the massive frame, and he's a really good athlete to the point, even at that size, where Alabama would give him the football. They would hand him the football. They would throw him the football. I mean, he's just a very strangely just terrific athlete at over 350 pounds. The weight is something I do have some concerns with, right? But weighing in at the combine at 352, I Bleav it was, that was a good sign. Right. And I think even if you could get him down into that 340 range, he could be a really good player. There's been some tackle guard debate with him, but no question, he's got the talent. He was one of the best pass protectors in college football this past year. The run game at Alabama obviously wasn't great as a unit, so he kind of suffered a little bit from that as well. But when you talk about at his size, the athleticism that you get, you just don't see it very often. If he can keep his weight down, he could be a franchise tackle for somebody. It's just a matter of a team having a plan and having that placement for him.
Dalton Wasserman joining us here on Bleav in Panthers Draft Edition while we creep towards the NFL draft for 2026. One of the positions also that they filled very well in free agency, the Panthers, was linebacker. And they've had a concentrated effort at linebacker really from the draft last year, drafting Nick Scorton, Prince, Emanuel, and then what they did this year in the free agency period. Is there a linebacker at 19? Now, all this is I should have prefaced this with, this is all assuming that Dan Morgan does not trade up for anybody, that he stays at 19. So is there a linebacker around that area that the Panthers might swing on, even though they just spent all this money in free agency on a linebacker? I don't know if they're sold on Trevin Wallace being the middle linebacker of this, and I'm not sure if they're going to move Phillips to middle linebacker, Jalen Phillips, who they just signed in from Philly. Or do they look for one in the draft to groom there? Dan Morgan, I've been kind of waiting on him. He's a middle linebacker at heart. I've been waiting on him to kind of pull the trigger on a middle linebacker to quarterback the defense. Is there one in this draft that would be potentially in the same vein as, I don't even really want to say it, but to the same vein of a Luke Kuechly or a John Beeson or a Dan Morgan? These guys that were middle linebackers for Carolina that have kind of been each generational middle linebackers. Is there a guy like that in this draft this year or no?
I mean, the 2 guys who might be generational to me at that position probably are not getting to the Panthers at 19, and that's Sonny Styles and Arll Reese, right out of Ohio State. They're both probably going to be top 8 picks, right? So Sonny Styles, for as much as he'd be a perfect fit next to Devin Lloyd, and let me just throw out there that Devin Lloyd was my favorite free agent signing by any team in the league this offseason. I thought to reset the linebacker position, starting with him as such a young talent, he was one of the best linebackers in football this past year. That's a great base to have, and then you have a great linebacker class, honestly. honestly the best one we've seen in several years. So 19 is kind of a weird spot. There are a couple of candidates. I think about C.J. Allen from Georgia, who really terrific instinctual run defender. And with the coverage complement that Devin Lloyd is, C.J. Allen would be a great fit. I do wonder the varying opinions on Jacob Rodriguez at Texas Tech, too. I mean, just such the epitome of a playmaker that he was. I mean, you're talking about a linebacker who was 5th in the Heisman voting this past year. That's not for nothing. 7 forced fumbles, 4 interceptions. I mean, just an unreal year that he had at Texas Tech. But even then, the day 2 crop is really good. Jake Golday from Cincinnati. Josiah Trotter, the son of former Eagle Jeremiah Trotter, just a heavy-handed hammer of a middle linebacker. If you want run defense, you'll get it out of Josiah Trotter in the 2nd or 3rd round. So I really think they have a lot of options. Even if 19 is kind of a weird spot in this class for the linebackers in that range, definitely a lot of good day 2 options as well.
So I'm almost feeling like Dan might trade down and just pick up extra picks in the second day 2. Because again, like you said, it feels like this draft isn't as star-studded as the past couple of years, especially when you have like Fernando Mendoza probably going number 1 to the Raiders. But I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm really comfortable with that. It feels like Mendoza just kind of hit a year where it was the good quarterbacks aren't coming out yet. So like it's like him and then I guess Simpson at Alabama are the 2 that everyone's kind of talking about. I know the Panthers just brought in Kenny Pickett to back up Bryce Young at quarterback, and they did trade Andy Dalton to Philly. So they're the only 2 quarterbacks on this roster. Is there a quarterback that you think that the Panthers, not necessarily first round, but is there a quarterback out there that you think might be a good project fit for Carolina that they might take a swing on in this draft, or you think they feel pretty good about the quarterback room they have?
You can always bring in a 3rd guy, which is when you have 2 established guys like Bryce and like Kenny, right? I think you're looking more into some of those round 6 and 7 options, right? So I think it's certainly something they could take a flyer on later. When I think of guys who could be way later in that range, I think about a Luke Altmaier from Illinois, who just has kind of the profile of a solid backup. If you talk about a project, maybe a Talon Green, who's super athletic, but kind of raw when it comes to his athleticism. A Sawyer Robertson from Baylor, kind of the same thing. If he's got to work on the accuracy a little bit, but he certainly has the build and the arm strength to play the position. Joey Aguilar from Tennessee, he's kind of a late entrant into this race now, he had a big eligibility battle with Tennessee in the NCAA and all that, but he's going to be in this draft. So I do think maybe in round 6 or 7, you look for kind of that 3rd string guy to add some depth and see if he can be a functional backup for you in the case of, if there's any injuries, obviously to Bryce or even to Kenny Pickett in the worst case scenario. You always want that 3rd guy in there, but I don't think it's something they would prioritize in the early to mid parts of the draft. I think round 6 or 7, that's the time when you really just take a flyer on a guy you like.
So now I'm starting to feel like they might just do something crazy here at pick 19. Last year, I was out there screaming they have to go defense at pick 8 or whatever. You gotta go defense. And there was a couple people on social media that were like, no, he's gonna pick Tech McMillan. I'm like, doesn't make any sense. They just got Xavier Legette last year and they traded up for him. Why would they get another wide receiver? And then lo and behold, they do it. And then after they do it, Dan Morgan's basically like up at the podium, like, yeah, we kind of had a smoke screen the whole time. Bryce has been throwing with him, like all this stuff we didn't even know. I'm sitting there wondering at 19, now that they did all this on defense and free agency, I feel like they're going to go after a weapon for Bryce Young. Give me some weapons for Bryce Young. And it can be I know Stu wants Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. And I don't know if he'll be there at 19, but it looks like they want some kind of dynamic playmaker there for that. And then give me some guys that you think might still be there at 19 that might be a good fit here, because this wide receiver room is kind of filling up, but they could use tight end. They always pick up a running back. Doesn't necessarily be the first round, but just give me some guys here that might be able to use.
I think starting with Kenyan Sadiq, it makes a lot of sense to me for Carolina if he were to get to 19, because they've got so many blocking and inline types there that they just need the receiving complement. It's been one of the least productive tight end rooms when it comes to receiving in the league over the last couple of years. So that's somebody who definitely I think should intrigue them at 19 with the athletic potential and the potential that he can work this up the seams of a defense from that tight end position. But when you talk about receiver, getting kind of unpredictable here a little bit. I think there's a lot of different opinions when it comes to especially the top of this receiver receiver class. I think Carnell Tate would be gone, but I think if you're looking at it, depends on the flavor. If they want an after the catch type of player who can work the slot and all over the field, Mekhi Lemon from USC, Omar Cooper from Indiana has been a hot name in scouting circles. He had a great year in the slot for Indiana. Casey Concepcion's an explosive player who gives you punt return value as well. If they want a bigger one-on-one type of receiver, would they take the chance on the medicals of Jordan Tyson, maybe from Arizona State? Denzel Boston is a guy who I think is really good against man-to-man coverage, just winning those one-on-one matchups. Really what they were hoping they would get out of Xavier Legette, if you want to go kind of with a supersized receiver room there with not Jaden Higgins. Boston reminds me of Jaden Higgins, but Denzel Boston and Teteroa McMillan. You're really talking about, I think to me, I think the advantage that they have with some of the defensive moves they've made, like you mentioned, they can play to the board. And if the board were to tell them to take a weapon, I think they're well within their right to do that. So it's just a matter of what type of player they're looking for that can fill out this offense. But I think Sadiq and probably 4 or 5 different receiver prospects could really be of intrigue to them.
The Dalton Wasserman joined us here on Bleav in Panthers. I do, before actually we go a little bit further, because I want to get into some of the moves the Panthers made in free agency before I get you out of here. Quick word from our friends over at ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds qualified candidates quickly. ZipRecruiter has a new feature now that shows you the most interested qualified candidates first, so you meet the right people faster. Candidates can tell you in their own words why they're interested in your job. No wonder ZipRecruiter is the number 1 rated hiring site based on G2. It helps you find candidates who really want your job on ZipRecruiter. This has helped me out a lot when we've used it before to find writers, other podcasts, hosts that are interested in this kind of thing. It's helped out a lot for myself and what I do outside of Bleav. Try it for free, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Use the URL right there. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. That's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter. And again, Dalton Wasserman joining us here, draft guru. I want to go outside of the Panthers and talk about the draft as a whole. And who do you think is going to be the second overall pick? Because it feels like Mendoza is going to be number 1, unless the Raiders do something crazy. Well, I'll talk about Mendoza in a minute, but who do you think is going to be number 2 probably after him? Because it feels like he's going to be the guy.
Right now, the favorite for the Jets in that second pick is Arll Reese, the linebacker hybrid, some think edge player out of Ohio State, right? He's so young. He's got so much talent. I mean, you've seen, there's pass rush flashes. I think he's a better linebacker than he is an edge rusher personally, but he can play in that hybrid role, kind of like Jihad Campbell does now for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Arll Reese is the favorite, but I think the Jets are looking to make the front 7 better. So if it's not him, I think it's going to be a lot of consideration given to Ruben Bane from Miami, David Bailey from Texas Tech. They need one more edge player to really complete that front 7. Or if they go with Reese, it might be in more of a hybrid role, maybe playing a lot of linebacker, coming down off the edge in certain fronts. I mean, there's different ways you could really make your defense more fluid with Reese. But I think Reese is the favorite, and maybe one of those other edge players is going to be still lurking as we get closer to the draft.
The Mendoza situation. Let's go back to Mendoza real quick. I know Mendoza won the national championship. Fantastic game against Miami. Indiana's talk of the town. But in any other year, I don't think Mendoza is even a top 10 pick. Are you sold on Mendoza being the number 1 overall pick in this draft? If so, why or why not?
In this draft, yeah, I actually think they're a little bit different, but I think he's a pretty talent-wise, I think he's pretty comparable even to Cam Ward last year. I think there would have been consideration for him going number 1 in last year's class. Now, in that 2024 class that was loaded with Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and those guys, maybe not. He might have been the 4th best player in that class, and that's still, that's a loaded class. He's a good prospect, and I think if he's developed properly and the surroundings are right, I think at some point in his career he can be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's pretty solidly the best quarterback in this class, and obviously positional need for the Raiders especially is going to make him the first overall pick. So would he be the number 1 pick every year? Probably not. I think he deserves it in this year's class. I think in last year's class, with Cam Ward, he would have even had an argument. So solid prospect, not on the level of Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams and some of the special ones that we've seen in the past, but a good prospect who I think could be a very good starter for a long time. Who's
the best defensive player in this draft that you feel like is going to go in the top 3 or so? Because there's a couple that are out there. Who in your mind would you go for first in the defense here?
We've got some great ones. And the theme of this draft class to me is that it's even more so than last year, very, very heavy leaning towards the defense, both at the top end talent and the depth. I'll be honest with you. I love Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. He probably won't go over some other guys based on positional value, right? The edge players, even Sonny Styles as a linebacker might go top 5. But man, oh man, Caleb Downs, I could argue is the smartest defensive player in the country for the last 3 years. You don't start as a true freshman in the secondary for Nick Saban, and he did that. He was their best player immediately. And then the 2 years at Ohio State. I mean, you got to think about too, I think his football IQ can change a team's defense. He played in 3 different defensive systems in his college career, and he was the best player in all 3 systems. So I love Caleb Downs. Whoever gets him, again, I know safeties tend to drop. We saw it from Kyle Hamilton and Derwin James and some other guys, but whoever gets him, I think he can really change the complexion of a team's defense.
The one of the guys that I was actually interested in before the Panthers did everything they did in free agency was Ruben Bane Jr. out of Miami. I didn't know if he'd still be there at 19. Do you think he would be there at 19? And if he is that somebody that Carolina should take a swing on regardless with them doing what they did, spending all the money in free agency in that spot?
Yeah, if he was there at 19, take him. That guy's too talented to drop to 19. I don't think he's getting outside of maybe the top 12. I'm just going to say top 12 at the worst. I know there's arm length concerns, and a lot of the scouting community doesn't trust the outlier of that. But look, this is another one. I watched him play at Miami for 3 years. He was their best player, I would argue, on defense. I would argue all 3 years, really. I mean, you talk about the versatility and the excellence that he brings in run defense. He can move inside, outside, wherever you need him to in the line of scrimmage. And Jason Taylor, the Dolphins legend, did such a great job coaching him and Akeem Mesidor. Look out for his teammate possibly there, Akeem Mesidor at 19 as well. Awesome football player, well taught, really good frame. But Bane's awesome. I think Bane is clearly, to me, a top 10 talent in this draft. If he gets by even, say, number 10 to the Cincinnati Bengals, I would be surprised, because I don't know why you wouldn't want this guy in your defensive line.
And then finally, give me a surprise pick. It feels like we get a top 10 surprise pick every year. Most recently, Atlanta, 2 years ago, picking the quarterback. Now they're not even sure if they're going to have him available in the top 10. He probably could have went much later, but they took a chance on him. Is there a guy or is there a team like that might reach for somebody? As I'm looking through the top 10, Raiders, Jets, Cards, Titans, Giants, Browns, Commanders, Saints, Chiefs, Bengals are your top 10 picks here. Is there a guy that might be a reach for one? I'm looking at Arizona for some reason, but is there a team that might reach for somebody that probably should not be picked in the top 10 here?
I actually when I do some of these mocks, I find a lot of good matches for the first 9. I'm actually going to go to the very last pick at number 10. And there's certain players to me that I think they should sprint the card in for the Cincinnati Bengals with. Like, if Caleb Downs is on the board, they should take him. If Sonny Styles is on the board, they should take him, right? Even if David Bailey were on the board, they should take him. But I do wonder if that collection of guys is gone. Who goes at number 10 to the Bengals? What do they prioritize? Is it somebody like a Dylan Theamman getting all the way up to the 10th pick? Do they take a chance on, still, I know he's got the foot injury now, but do they take a chance on the tools of a Caleb Banks like they did with Shamar Stewart last year? Keldrick Falk from Auburn, an edge player, is another guy. Boatload of tools. How much do they believe in him, right? You always get those guys who go maybe a little higher than their production says they should because of measurables and athletic, potential, things like that. So those are some guys that I do wonder about. And then I'm curious to see when the run of receivers happens, right? Because I don't think we have a stone cold, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase type of lock top 5 talent at receiver, but could one go as high as 2 overall to the Jets if they feel like, no, we're going the offensive side of the ball? The Giants at 5, right? Are they going to be the first team? Cleveland at 6, and how their approach is going to be between the receiving core and their offensive line. I think the receiver situation for the entire group is very interesting. Could we see 6 of them in the top 20? Could we only see maybe 3 or 4 of them in the entire first round? That's something I'm really looking forward to, how teams are going to prioritize that receiver position. Again, with especially as few wide receivers, elite receivers hit free agency. It's so hard to get them externally now. You got to get these guys and develop them from the inside.
Follow Dalton online. Tell them where they can find you on X and everywhere, Dalton.
Absolutely. At CFB_Dalton on X, where we're going to have all sorts of draft and college football coverage as well. We've got the Preferred Walk-On College Football Show, myself and Max Chadwick on YouTube. We're actually doing a mock draft this week. I Bleav we're doing a 2-round mock this week, so check that out as well as more scouting reports leading up to the draft only a couple weeks away.
There you go. So NFL analyst and co-host of the Preferred Walk-On College Football Show with Max Chadwick, Dalton Wasserman. Appreciate the info. We're still kind of waking up to the fact that the draft is right around the corner, and trying to figure out what Dan Morgan's going to do next. It's an exciting time in the Carolinas and in general, not just with the Panthers, the Hornets, and everything else going on. Maybe not for Duke fans, but it's pretty much exciting for everybody else right now. So appreciate you coming through, Dalton. Again, on FanDuel, go to sportsbook.fanduel.com. You can actually place bets on a lot of these different things. The NCAA tournament, the Final Four, is this upcoming weekend. You can place your bets on who will make it to the national championship game still. I Bleav Michigan still has the greatest odds, but they got a tough matchup against Arizona in the nightcap on Saturday night. And UConn and Illinois are the game before that. So you can make your picks there still. You can make, I think you can make picks on who's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. Pretty much everything. So go over to FanDuel, sportsbook.fanduel.com, place your bets there, and you should be good to go. Shout out to ZipRecruiter again for helping sponsor this podcast. For Dalton, this is Desmond Johnson. Stu will be back with me next week. You've been listening and watching the Bleav in Panthers podcast here on Bleav Podcast Networks. Keep on it.